Hello, everyone, and welcome to Financing Philadelphia's Future. Um, we don't have our usual slide because we had a bit of a glitch, but generally speaking, we do these once a month. Financing Philadelphia's Future is a conversation about Philadelphia's quest for a public bank. And today we are very, very, very excited to have another wonderful guest. And this time we're talking from Vermont, and we're going to hear about their quest for a public bank. So our guest is Esme Cole. Esme has been a member of the Vermont House of Representatives since 2023, and she is a Public Banking Institute board member. Thank you for that, Esme. We're going to discuss the history of the public banking movement in Vermont and its prospects for the future. They've been on a bit of a similar journey. As in Philadelphia, their movement, they were unable to create a public bank in the one-step process and instead created a special revolving loan fund. And so Vermont established its Local Investment Advisory Committee, or LIAC. LIAC is funded primarily by the Vermont Treasurer's 10% in Vermont program and invests up to 10% of the state's average daily cash balance into projects that grow Vermont's economy and strengthen the state's revenues. And they've also got additional 2.5% of the state's average daily balance to provide financing for climate infrastructure and resilience projects. And additional funds have been allocated to provide credit facilities for state programs. For example, $8 million for the State Emergency Management Program. So I'm going to turn it over to Esme for some opening remarks. And as we go through the conversation, we'll learn more. But that sounds like quite the success so far. Esme, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor to be here, and to be discussing a subject that I think is going to get a lot more airtime in years to come. I think when I first learned about the term public banking, it I don't think it carried as much weight as I think it will in 20 years. Sort of seems like a sort of pie in the sky, unrealistic idea. And I think in years to come, that's not going to be the case at all. And we're going to be like, why didn't we do this sooner? But that's my personal bias based on what I've learned and what I've heard here. But I guess I will start off. Happy to answer any questions as we go along here. But I'll start off in how I became interested in this subject area. Um,
Perfect.
because I don't come from a financial literacy background. My work has been in all sorts of different sectors, but banking has not been one of them. Um, but I think that's precisely why this conversation is so important, because I think for a long, long time, this subject area has been a little bit gatekept from the general public. We think that only a small sector of the population, those on Wall Street, those wearing, nice suits, are able to understand how our monetary system works on a systemic level versus, financial literacy, like what we were taught in school, balancing a checkbook. And so I would love to see in a future where, because nobody's balancing checkbooks these days, whereas our home economics courses might include something on a broader scale, because we need to connect the dots as to how that larger system is actually affecting our wallets very directly, and our ability to acquire money on an individual level, familial level, but also to fund the systems that make our lives, enjoyable, such as in infrastructure that's critical. And I think about that a lot being, in my occupation on a state level, we're always wondering how are we going to get the money to do this. So I will start off by saying I discovered the concept of public banking in taking a graduate course at University of Vermont. And there was really one sentence that a professor said that really caught my attention. And he basically drew a little graph on the whiteboard. And with something on either side, the word taxes on one side and interest on the other side. And if you picture like a bubble, basically, one thing we don't realize is how much of our tax bill is being directly, sourced to fund interest payments, to pay for the projects that we would naturally assume are covered by taxes. Like that's what taxes in theory are for. Um, and when it comes to politics narratives, especially the Republican Democrat, dichotomy or argument against one another, a lot of people often see taxes as kind of the enemy these days, because we think they're too high, and it's really cutting into our ability to harness in our own finances and use them for what we want to use. But really, the way they framed it to me was that perhaps it's not taxes that are the enemy, at least in some ways, because in theory, taxes, once you put in, you're going to get something back. And of course, we could have a long discussion about whether or not that works the way we want it to. Um, but then when you compare that to the concept of interest, when you funnel money into it, it disappears. You say goodbye to the money that um, you had to give away. So we don't distinguish between the two when we're paying our tax bill. And this thought bubble about like who is the real enemy, and I don't know if enemy is the right word necessarily, but we like to point fingers, and especially having had to run a campaign, taxes was the big go-getter for like as a sort of like an offensive statement, like they're going to raise your taxes. And the state of Vermont actually lost the largest number of legislators. We lost a third of our legislators in this most recent election cycle because of that campaign slogan, that we were just raising your taxes basically for no reason because we are wealthy and we don't care about you. That was sort of the narrative that was put out against Democrats in particular. And I totally see where they're coming from. But I also think that we're not seeing the full picture as to where this money's going. So a little bit of lengthy context there, but I just kind of wanted to give you my heartfelt reasoning for why I'm really excited to be here today. And we can talk about the technicalities of what's made Vermont special in our history in making this work.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that background on how, that class and the power of teachers, right? The power of
Oh,
classes.
undoubtedly.
So what was your role? You came into the legislature in 23. Were you a champion for this? Like, so what role did you play in getting this to fruition? I mean, it's not a bank yet, just like, we don't have, but that loan fund has been created and it has been financing things, yes?
Yes. So pretty remarkable what the local investment advisory committee, who governs the 10% for Vermont program, um, it's pretty remarkable what they've been able to invest in. And maybe I should backtrack a little bit and give us a bit of an overview of this program because it is unique.
Mhm. Yep.
So 10% for Vermont, it's, easy and catchy to say. But what that really means is, I'm pulling up the exact statute. This was, you know, written up by our legislature or by a bill proposed and then passed through a lot of effort and a bit of back and forth. But the first line in this bill is basically the treasurer has the authority to establish a credit facility of up to 10% of the average daily cash balances of the state per 10 VSA, 10 investment of state funds. So all the cash we have on hand, because Vermonters are contributing through their tax dollars, up to 10% of that we are mandating in state statute can be reinvested in our state. And the way we decide how to reinvest this 10% of our average daily cash balance will be decided, and this is part of the legislation, by both the treasurer and an advising committee. So that advising committee is the LIAC, the Local Investment Advisory Committee. And they meet on a pretty regular basis throughout the year, and there's a certain period of time where they're accepting applications for projects. And according to the statute that was passed, there are three main things that committee is going to look for when looking over an application. Housing is a really big issue in Vermont, and we're not alone, of course, but it's pretty dire, especially given the inequality gap that we have in our particular state, environmental goals, and social equity goals. In statute, this is what we defined to be the three priorities of the original 10% for Vermont loan program. There's more to this too, because in 2023, I believe, um, there was an amendment to this statute, um, which is pretty exciting because I think it sets an important precedent that it can be amended. And this amendment basically expanded our lending capacity by 2.5%. So even though we're calling it the 10% for Vermont program, really it's turning into a 12.5% for Vermont program, which is pretty remarkable. And the way they went about this, and I wasn't involved in this particular piece of legislation, but we have a really devastating recent history of severe flooding, which took a real toll on our state in all sorts of ways. But speaking in terms of infrastructure, that was really sizable and dramatic. So what they chose to do in this proposal of amendment was to dedicate that extra 2.5% to resilience, basically resilience from disaster response, really. Yeah, grants, technical assistance, those were the kinds of projects that would be funded by this additional 2.5%.
Fantastic. Tell us about the LIAC and how people were chosen or identified to be on the committee.
That's a great question. So the treasurer is given a pretty sizable amount of power in the way the statute is written. And so the treasurer is the one who appointed those members of the committee. And if I'm correct, I think, let's see, I think there were about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6. There are 6 members.
including the treasurer
Okay.
himself. So and this particular 6, I'm not sure that they were the same when we had a different treasurer. So
Okay.
our current treasurer and I, we actually entered office at the same time. And so it's been pretty amazing to see how, although the 10% for Vermont program initially began with a previous treasurer, Beth Pierce is her name. I think Mike has really used that infrastructure to hit the ground running. And I can talk in more detail about some of the projects we've been able to finance for, as little as 1% interest for things that have a ripple effect on the economy and leverage other both public and private dollars as well.
Yeah. Yes, let's definitely move into that. But I just want to point out, it's interesting to sort of point out the differences. So our legislation sort of laid out similar projects, maybe a longer list of things, but the appointment of it was going to be the board members for the Philadelphia Financing Authority. We were identifying people who were connected to the types of projects that would then be funded. So people who worked in community development financial institutions or were very much involved in cooperatives, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's interesting. But yeah, we'd love to hear about particularly some of the bigger projects and more impactful projects that have already been financed through the program.
And Vanessa, I think, ours is actually a little bit similar. So the treasurer he has appointed people who have, are deeply connected to the project we're funding, basically.
Good.
So the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, Efficiency Vermont, which is energy and environment related issues, Vermont Economic Development Authority, the Municipal Bond Bank, and VSAC, which is our student loan organization. So all
That's
big players.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I'd love to know what they're doing with the loan. Start with that one. Yeah.
Well, that's a good question, actually. I think, to be honest, in the most recent timeline, they have really emphasized housing.
Got it. Go ahead. Tell us
Housing and
about that.
resilience. And so I hope, and maybe I've missed something in the past, but it seems like that is the biggest highlight from the reports that LIAC has produced. But I'll have to keep a close eye out if I'm missing anything related to student loans. We know that the
Cool.
Bank of North Dakota, that's a huge
It's a
priority in their
big priority.
state bank
Yes.
is student
Mhm.
loans. So
Yeah.
definitely interesting and really glad that it's part of that.
Yeah. But affordable housing is so key. So what have they done around affordable housing?
Oh man.
And I assume it's affordable. Maybe yeah, like what kind of housing and
Yeah.
what's about that?
Would I workforce housing is so
Ah,
yes, more affordable than market rate, I believe.
okay.
I've been lucky that little housing complex in my community just barely, had their ribbon cutting
Oh,
and is really incredible. I'll read just a quick snippet from this press release that gives you a little more detail.
great.
Um, but It says, so 84 million has been invested to support housing and economic development, helping leverage an additional 345 million in private and public capital to support nearly 1,300 units of housing and over 100 permanent new jobs.
Wow, that's
I know.
fantastic.
Additionally, 20 million has been invested to help 24 municipalities recover from the 2023 and 2024 summer flooding through the Vermont Bond Bank's Municipal Climate Recovery Funds. So those are really the two big um,
And in 2 years, wow, that's impressive. For it was passed in 2023, so just in 2 years they've gotten that much done. And you said there was a ribbon cutting. So does that mean they were putting the shovel in the ground, or they were like saying, okay, people are ready to move in? I forget which that means.
Oh, people are living there. Yeah,
Wow. Okay, so
so
it's been built. How many?
it's
And
been built.
that's amazing. Okay, great, great, great.
Yeah, this particular project, I don't know the exact number of units, but I do drive by them every day. And they're
Mhm.
beautiful and they're simple, but they're so effective and right downtown. So it's actually a project affiliated with the Northern Stage is what it's called. So it's a play, I'm sorry, a theater. Um,
Oh,
a theater space in our community. And so the actors are able to live there and the other stage crew are able to live there. And it's just an
wow.
amazing contributor to our economy in so many ways.
Fantastic, fantastic. Great.
So
And so I'm sorry, Stan, Peter, did you have a question?
that was me. That was me.
Okay, sorry, Stan, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I'm intensely curious how you persuaded the powers that be or before you that they could risk part of the operating cash because, we are constantly told here that even though we actually at this moment have reserves of, I think, around $1 billion, that could evaporate at any moment. So
Wow.
yeah. So how was the argument made about that? And have there been any emergency calls that have uh, challenged your ability to allocate that money?
So, the history for this program, although a lot of the major projects have really started occurring in the past few years, it goes back to about 2015. And so, unfortunately, I was still a senior in high school when this happened. Um, but in terms of actually getting people to bite into this idea, um, I there was a particular senator or two who I think really laid the groundwork and put in a lot of grassroots effort in talking to the powers that be, particularly the treasurer at the time, who was not immediately keen on the idea. So this definitely did not come without resistance. Um, let's see. I think within the past 10 years, there have been 10 proposals plus for a public bank in general.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but when it comes to the particular 10% for Vermont program, I think if I, from what I've heard, this was a compromise basically because the treasurer was nowhere near comfortable having the, creating a depository on its own that, functions like a state bank in the state of Vermont. So that risk felt too much. And we all may differ on what that risk actually means or what it would look like compared to what we're doing today. But it was it was really a couple legislators who put in very specific legislation that talked about uh, this daily cash balance allocation that I think through discussions they were able to agree on this feels okay, this feels right. And they must have incorporated in the language too that the treasurer has a lot of power in making adjustments if something doesn't feel comfortable.
Okay.
So they do, yeah, I think that language very specifically might have helped them to lean in a little bit more to what might have felt scary at first, but it's turned out to be incredible. And
Yeah.
we would be in an even more dire place without the projects that this program has been able to support.
Sounded like it came in just in time. How is it calculated, Esme? Is it the balance at the end of the year? Then is that allocation for the following year? Do you know the formula?
Let's see. Well, the statute specifically says 10% of the average daily cash balances. So, I'm assuming at the time that and this would be much better answered by some of the people who work on the technical pieces of this, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that at the time when they're accepting applications, they're going to have a sense of what our average daily cash
Ah,
balance is,
okay.
and so what they're willing to lend proportionally
Got
to
it.
that.
Got it. Got it. That
Um,
makes sense.
and
One
just
time a year. Yeah. Okay.
I think so. And just to put it in perspective as well, I heard you mention the word 1 billion in terms of what's available
Yeah.
in Philadelphia, which is just so funny because we're a whole state and we're only doubled that. We have since 2022, our average daily cash balance has been consistently over 2 billion.
Hmm.
Wow.
So that's about what we're working with.
You have
But
half the
that's
population of Philadelphia.
oh my gosh, that's true. That's true.
There you go.
Yeah.
So how are
That's
you?
not
So your hope is to leverage the success you've had in getting buy-in for a public bank. How is that going?
Well, these are conversations that we're having right now. And I don't want to jump the gun too soon either, because I really do want to take what's working
Mhm.
and spread the good word like we're doing right now, right here, to show that for example, the 84 million that has been invested in housing, um, the fact that that has leveraged an additional 345 million. I
Mhm.
mean, let's just think about like the argument right now. Vermont holds its money in M&T Bank. So,
Mm.
a big private bank.
Mhm.
Would we have been able to leverage that same amount of money in interest payments by just letting our money sit there? So monetarily, it seems maybe I'm missing some detail here, but monetarily, it doesn't seem to make sense. And then in terms of a quality of life standpoint, just the value. Like we can talk about monetary value, of course. Like we know this investment has resulted in incredible more monetary investment, but also just like I'm just looking around in my community and seeing there's more life. We have more affordable housing, we have more infrastructure projects, and we're recovering from disaster that was the flood of 2 years ago, which has still taken quite a toll on us. So, I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer, and we're leveraging the power of our community banks too. Some of these um, projects, in Rutland, Vermont, for example, we were able to amplify the lending ability of a community bank there by partnering with them through their treasurer's office and mitigating that risk and offering a really low interest rate for many years to come. So it's just a beautiful thing.
Tell us more about that Rutland Bank project. So what was that partnership like? It's definitely one of the things we talked about as a value. We're not trying to replace the banks. We're actually trying to help them, and also the CDFIs, because we were getting a little pushback about that. But tell us about how that partnership worked and what was the project.
Oh, right. Yeah. So let's see. Just pulling up the details right now.
Mhm.
But they called this project Roots or Roofs over Rutland. So it's a housing project, a multifamily unit housing project, which is affordable. And Heritage Family Credit Union was the financial institution.
Love that it was a credit union. Yes.
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 So they agreed because it was in both of their interests to combine efforts and lend out. It looks like it was $1.3 million. at a rate of, wait for it, 1%
Mm.
to build. I know, incredible compared to the market rate right now.
Wow.
And I would have to, oh, I should know this off the top of my head, but I think the number of housing units that they were able to create is pretty remarkable.
Wow. So that's another completed project. And so the role that LIAC played was to lend these two institutions at 1% what was needed to build the units.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Wow.
Yep,
Wow. That's
because
amazing.
absolutely, we know the cost of building anything new right now is incredibly high. And to
Mhm.
make it worse, interest rates aren't going to help.
Yeah.
So this is like, I couldn't, I don't even see how it's feasible to do it otherwise. And that's why the only houses being built right now are houses that are luxurious, expensive, because that's
Mm.
the only way to make a profit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So ultimately there's a blended rate, right? Your program lended 1%, the credit union had to lend at a higher rate, and it wound up as a somewhat blended rate, I assume.
That's my understanding as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And have those homes been built also, or they're still in process?
I am just sorry for this. This
Take your
particular
time.
project I don't. Oh my goodness, yeah, 89 new housing units.
Wow.
Yep, finished apartments on Wales Street as well as a mix of affordable, workforce, and high-end options.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
So that
nearly
does
90
include.
apartments. So,
Wow.
yeah, and I think some are finished, and I don't know that all are. Some are in
Got it.
development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
And
Well,
that's a lot.
congratulations.
That's
That is a
incredible.
lot. That is a
Yeah,
lot. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
for a small population state like ours, maybe not for a big city, but
Exactly. Exactly. All right. What other questions do we have, Peter?
Well, Esme, in addition to housing, you're also financing public works, and the public works um, ultimate financing has huge savings and interest for the state. There was one of the numbers in a study back in 2014 uh, uh, saw $100 million of interest savings coming from the investments in public works projects by LIAC in the program. So it's both um, leveraging the state's funds to attract private money to get these projects built economically, and also keeping the money uh, for the infrastructure development of the state in the state, so that it doesn't go outside of Vermont into other investors' pockets, but is returned to the taxpayers.
absolutely. We want to have healthy, happy, thriving communities. We need infrastructure. And also, it's really hard to build housing without water and sewer. I know in more urban areas that's not as much of a consideration, but in Vermont, that is a huge barrier to building housing, is that we don't have water and sewer just for the town. We do, individual septic systems in a lot of cases.
Mm.
So this is incredible. It works, it's a sister to the housing initiatives as well. And it's all going into your tax bill. So might as well keep it instead of having a huge portion being siphoned away.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Esme, we're gonna turn off the recording and say that's the end of the formal conversation, but we will continue it afterwards. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Um,
So great to be with you.